Hello, 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 hello. I'm joining you a few minutes later than promised, but I just got off a podcast I recorded. It'll be out next week. So I'm bringing you a ton of new podcasts that are talking to leaders about what they think is important next in work and how to really emerge, as I've talked about a lot, impacted, not traumatized, but how to really not waste this experience. And I just talked to Frank Calderoni, and he is just coming out with a book called Upstanding, and it's a pre-order right now. And so a way to help Frank out in a big way is to go and pre-order the book Upstanding. And if you can do that from one of your independent bookstores, awesome. Of course, it's on Amazon. But the author is Frank Calderoni, and it's Upstanding. I didn't mean to intend to come and talk to you about this, but I'm so excited about this book. And the book is about a concept called corporate character or character-led culture. And it's super important because it takes all these disparate things like our company brand and our reputation and that employee experience and our values. And it takes all these nebulous things, like our values are like aspirational, but what are like the essential behaviors that need to drive those values? And it aligns them through this concept called character. And oddly enough, having a strong company character is really this compilation of these non-negotiables that we will come together, and while we want everyone to belong and be included, and we want all the diversity of opinions, and we want people to work as unencumbered and unmicromanaged as possible, we do need some structure here, some non-negotiables, some things that we can agree on. And so, for instance, some of my companies, everything's anonymous. And so people can put in anything, venting in the form of a question. Leaders are expected to always take the high road and live up to the values. And employees, hidden by anonymity, can like basically put anything out there, allegations, whatever. And it says, no, 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 no. Our values aren't just a poster on the board. What are the essential behaviors? Another company I work with, I love Compass Data Centers, talks about what are the core convictions. And convictions are that when you're not living up to them and acting accordingly, you're convicted. You're called out and called up. And so it's not just loving people up, but it's loving people and calling people up. And it's one example. He's providing kind of a fix on how we take a soundbite and weaponize it and use it in such a limited way, and we boil it down for the ego into something so simplistic and either or, and we really take the richness, the complexity out of it, the intentionality, the needing to come together and talk things through. When we soundbite stuff, or when we are underskilled as leaders, but we throw out platitudes or things we heard, or as I talk about some complex things, I have people do this extreme, like, oh, so we should just shut up and listen to everything a leader says. That's always ego. The ego wants to take something, simplify it, and polarize it, and weaponize it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And so, character is a big deal, and we're all looking for people that have integrity. So his book has some really good stuff on it. Susan, we took the anonymous away that to you, love, helped everybody elevate their feedback. One of the things that I have gone on record is anonymity has killed accountability. We need anonymity in places where we need to hear from people who are disenfranchised, who are subject to power differences, who have very important things that there is no other way to report, not as the avenue to troll or the avenue to, without any courage, speak up. And so I'm pretty anti adding anonymous to everything, because I find people vent in the form of a question on the boards we put out there. They're like, hey, I have a question for you. Why doesn't leadership care about any people anywhere? It's like, well, okay. And so one of the things that I think is so important is to help people understand what to do with some of that, and also some of the things that have been weaponized. So I want to talk about that today. But Susie, I love that you guys have change that. So number one thing I've heard weaponized: resiliency. Suck it up, buttercup. Um, Folks, resiliency is not about yoga and it's not about meditation, although those are great habits and dedications that people have that increase their capacity to move through the world without getting ego hooked and conserving their energy and being efficient with how they work through and walk through the world. But resiliency has been weaponized many times by organizations to, somebody said, what'd you think when you signed up for healthcare? That, well, I thought I would be serving patients with as much support as humanly possible. It's just like the question when somebody says, well, what were you expecting when you wore a short skirt to the bar and had 2 drinks? You're like, a hangover, not to be like taken advantage of or raped. Like, we are weaponizing some things to deal with our own discomfort on many things being true at once. This is hard. We don't have a lot of choices. We still need to show up. It's not fair. It can be joyful. We've learned a lot. We can use this for good. All of those things, completely true. And so resiliency isn't heroics, and it isn't like being the toughest or persevering. Resiliency is anchoring your confidence and your secret weapon in your connection to others, that collective genius, that together we're genius. So a lot of health systems, especially right now, are rethinking well-being and resiliency. And they're doing a couple of things I want you to know about. One, they're showing that resiliency and well-being is shared accountability, and it's co-created. I can't just expect my organization to not ever let hard things come our way. That's not realistic. Reality happens. I also, as an organization, can't expect you to single-handedly, through heroics, make up for where we didn't have readiness, because it's just not about heroics. Resiliency is about, as something is bigger than what I individually can do, that I am quick to, without drama, get the facts of the situation, reach out to relationships I have that are positive because I've been helpful, not judgmental, and to, as quickly as possible, connect in additional resources and bring them to bear, not just extra bodies, but bring them to bear on the work. And then for all of us to sit back and self-reflect personally. What did the situation reveal for me? Where do I need to grow next? What am I using an old skill set for a new reality? Am I using a less than modern approach? And then for all of us to contemplate what we need to curate next and design into our work so that we rely less on resiliency. But that self-reflection is important, because this isn't about blaming the victim, but the systems that had less burnout and seemingly looked more resilient were systems that standardized everything they could get their hands on. They didn't fight the electronic medical record and want customization everywhere. They had things really automated. So they were able to radically simplify and to free human beings up to do the fancy, clever work. But you can't do that until you've done the standardized. So most people resist standardization, and they want it to be their preference, and they want to optimize before we standardize towards their preference. That actually ensures that you will have to use your own personal heroics in the future, because we can't leverage process or system. So people are surprised. They're like, I feel burned out. I'm like, what's your willingness level about standardization and giving up major parts of your job to automation? Well, I'm against it. I'm like, well, then it sounds like your life's going to be hard going forward. So we need to not weaponize resiliency. The other things I hear weaponized are like in healthcare, like they're talking about moral injury. And yes, there are some things that have happened that are moral injury, but that is a rare case. It's just like everybody's past boyfriend's a narcissist. No, they aren't. As a counselor, narcissism is not that rampant in the world as IG would have you led to believe. Any relationship that broke up and didn't go your way wasn't because you're in love with a narcissist and you're an empath. It was because, for whatever reason, you weren't able to bring things together and make a relationship that was fulfilling to both of you. That's it. I hear a lot about people taking like an article on moral injury or bullying and bring it down to define what this is. And it's such an oversimplification. It's the work of the ego. Whenever you intellectualize your experience, whenever you attach a feeling to a grievance as its only way to be expressed, you need to be careful because the ego loves certainty. I know what this is about. So when I can name it moral injury, I know what it's about, and you did it to me, and I have a name for it. The ego gets certain. And when we stop believing that multiple things can be true, we start to assign motive, we judge other people, we get our margin of error that we allow other people as in benefit of the doubt, we get it to be so slim that we now are on a track that no one will ever live up to our standards. The injury continues. And we don't realize that most of our suffering isn't from what actually happened. It's from the ego story about what happened or the ego naming something prematurely, because that kills learning, curiosity. It kills our ability to open up and let go. If I know what it's about and it was this and you did it, I am right, you are wrong. There's nowhere else we can go with this. Relationship over. My relationship with my leader done. Once I name it, staying curious just a few minutes longer says, what if multiple things could be true? Now, let me give you an example. A lot of people will say, so when this happened, we didn't get what we needed from leaders. And so therefore, this means that they're unsupportive and they don't care about us. And that means I can never trust leaders again. And then I won't ever let go of this. This was a wrong that I have to hold on to because I am right. And now we're so polarized that people hold on to things and they don't let go, which is a choice. Letting go is a choice. It's called forgiveness for a couple of reasons. The choice you make after letting go is the choice to grieve and just feel feelings. And the ego doesn't like that stuff. It wants to identify externally and keep this not about you. And it's avoiding of pain, because the feeling of the feelings, once you're embodied and you're feeling the feeling instead of intellectualizing the feeling and attaching it to a grievance, you then open your heart up and you can find compassion and you can find multiple things to be true. And the example that this means that my leaders don't care, what if all it meant was that a bunch of humans got caught in the pandemic and in the process of doing the best we could, some of us didn't have all we needed? What if that was the only storyline here? Wouldn't that be like a lot less to let go of, to realize that what I attached that never happened? People are like, I don't know how I'll ever trust them again. And I'm like, well, if you drop the story that they did all of this on purpose and ate bonbons while you did all the work, there's nothing to forgive them for. And so trust is easier. And so it's just so interesting to me as I watch people go through this. I talked to one nurse and she's like, I volunteered to staff a COVID testing unit because that's what was needed. And then she went on, she's like, it was a total setup, and I've lost my job on the unit I love, and now that unit's being disbanded. And so I'm just left out in the cold, and I'm like, unappreciated for all the work. I said, stop. What if the only story is in times of COVID, I was asked to staff a COVID testing site, and so I did. And now I'm working with my leader to find my next role in the organization. What if that was it? So there's so much being weaponized when we add meaning and motive and insult, when we use words like resiliency, which are a complex concept, and we use them in sound bites. Trust is being weaponized. How will I ever trust you again? It's like, well, if it involves me not being human and never screwing up again, you can't, because I will screw up, but only like daily. So our trust isn't about, well, I never bring you anything hard. Our trust needs to be about together we can have open dialogue and work through hard things. Trust is not trusting your potential. It's having an experience with you where we're able to resolve hard things, and that builds trust. So I'm going to look at Eric's up here. I'm afraid that COVID pandemic has created more moral injury, but people don't quite understand how organizations they work in are often unintentionally complicit in this moral injury. Two truths can coexist, however. So, Eric, I'm glad that you're bringing this up because I just think we need a lot more dialogue about moral injury. And COVID created that, right? But what I would tell you is that in shared accountability, injury can rarely happen without complicity on many parts. And until I label something injury or moral injury, until I put that on it, that name, it may not be that. So naming it gets pretty dangerous because it then gets pop culture-ish and then overused. So if I were your counselor, I would meet with you many, many times before we introduce a potential name or diagnosis like narcissism. But I cannot tell you, if you look at your IG feed, how many breakups are characterized as we were all in relationships with narcissists. It's just not even statistically possible. And so if we're going to talk moral injury, let's have an intentional and thoughtful and evidence-based conversation about that and how all of us were complicit in it. And so I love that you brought that up. I'm not saying to not go deep in these concepts. I'm asking people to broaden the conversation before we narrow it down and use it to name, because that's when it becomes weaponized at that very point. And these are all recorded. So somebody said, I wanted to write that down. And I wish I had written that down. What would have been the better way to word the loss she had? Oh, so for the nurse. So we want to have empathy and we want to love people up and call people up. And so I might have said something with a lot of, it's not just your words, it's your presence. I might have said something with a lot of energy around, first of all, let me appreciate you and the calling that you answered to do exactly what we needed when you were needed. And I want to pause here and appreciate that. I love that about you. You don't let things go, even when it is at your own expense. I really appreciate that. And it sounds like you had a lot of really wonderful years at your last unit. And you know what I know is that you were part of creating wonderful years. So assuming that the future won't be wonderful ignores the fact that you're going to be involved in your own future. You've created wonderful things in the past. Why wouldn't you be able to co-create that going forward? And so let's talk about what you want for yourself, what's important, what your next great partnership would be. And that's where we move out of weaponizing it into diffusing the drama, normalizing it, not accepting it, but just normalizing that, yeah, life is like that. And then looking towards, given what has been revealed to us, how can we use this for good, not evil? How can we take new research on moral injury and use it for good? How can we take, and too many times people are using it for, aha, got you. I knew I was right and you were wrong. This is further proof that I'm the victim, you're the villain. That is not using these discoveries and these conversations for good. And so we've got to be talking about, as I say, hope making a comeback. And as we look to the future, we can intentionally create a better world with better conversations. But if each conversation gets so quickly polarized and then weaponized, we aren't going to be able to have the intellectual breakthrough that we need. I talked with somebody recently and they're like, I need my workplace to be psychologically safe. And I said, that would be wonderful. I need the workplace to be psychologically safe for everybody. That's my goal. So let's talk about your part in that. And I just said, one of the things I think you might want to look at if you want psychological safety is, I've noticed that when a topic comes up, you very quickly narrow it down to the most polarized, threatening view, and then use that in a pretty frightening way back. I said, what if you didn't interpret your world only to be scary? What if you just stayed, what if you got better at mystery and better at uncertainty, and that not everything could be quickly named and we could then be judge and jury about who is right or who is wrong? Psychological safety isn't just about the world never threatening me. It's about me using good mental processes so I make sure that I'm not seeing insult or threat where there isn't any. A Course in Miracles would tell you that there just isn't anything but love out there. Like, it is our story, not our reality at times. And so I just keep wanting people to elevate their own consciousness, elevate their conversations. If conversations are exhausting, it's because they've been weaponized. End the conversation and begin a new one. Don't try and elevate a bad conversation. To stop taking anonymous questions and feedback with staff that have truly turned into a very few people trolling at staff meetings and quarterly town meetings versus productive, curious, open, honest feedback and dialogue. I'm Susie. I'm drinking what you're putting out there, picking up what you're putting down. I want to talk about how to do that. And I'm going to do a podcast on this too. When people come in with energy that's polarized or weaponed or activated, the first job as a leader is not to meet their energy with your energy, and do what you can to translate the question, see through the behavior for the true need. So somebody said, like, when will we get a CEO that actually cares about people and isn't driving all great leaders out of the organization? Which is like a question I saw recently. I'm like, wow, that's the start of our town hall. As a leader, I would say to these anonymous, because that's my reality, I would say, what I hear through at the core of this question is, are we concerned about our recent loss in some really great leaders? And so I want to address that. And so I just translated that. I'm still answering. This person seems to be concerned. If I see through the behavior of accusing me of driving people out, I can still see that there's a great concern in here. We're losing some great talent. Do we have concerns? And then I pivot the conversation to say, here's what we have in place currently. We have different places that leaders can, use exit interviews, and here's what we're monitoring. And we do meet with every leader. And then let me give you some truth. The leaders have recently left, have left for reasons of passion. They've found jobs that are their next level. And so, yeah, we definitely keep an eye on that. And I love that you're concerned about that. Well, we want somebody who can do a better job with this. Great. What I would love is right now in the chat, you put all of your feed forward about suggestions for the future of things that would be helpful. And so I think as leaders, we don't want to avoid the questions, but we have to get really good at saying, for you to come forward with this, there are some non-negotiables. To the point in this app we're developing, you can type in your question and we give it a drama rating of, like, whether that's venting in the form of a question or whether that is a question that has a high curiosity and open-mindedness, those types of things. Because a lot of people say they're curious, they ask a question right after they made an allegation, which says, I've already polarized and weaponized this, but I want to hear your answer because I'm pretty sure it won't pass any of the things I already believe about you. And so we need as leaders to be asking people to open up and elevate. And open up, people have gotten down to a margin of error being like this big. You can't move left, you can't move right until you have screwed up. How can we give benefit of the doubt to widen that up? How can we use not more tolerance, right? Not more ignoring, but what is the space between cancel, call out, call up, and work together to create something new and better? Because my rejecting you still divides us. And the only solution going forward is got to be one that unifies us or creates space where all of us can find place and belonging. And so it's so polarized to just, you screwed up, you're canceled. and then say, you know what, we have to not just put people in prison, because what about restitution, and what about recovery, and what about, you know, um, people growing and developing, never mind all the charges, they shouldn't be there in the first place, different topic. But I'm talking about people who have admitted guilt to some pretty challenging human behavior. I think part of hope making comeback is for us to start widening the circle around any conflict that just says, open our hearts, open our minds, let's seek to understand, let's stay curious. The answer isn't in the conversation we've already been having. The answer is in new conversations, and really call people up. And so anytime you go to extremes, you're probably weaponizing. Resilience has gotten weaponized. I said trust has gotten weaponized. Even like people coming to try and explain themselves has gotten weaponized. It's like, oh, of course you would say that. It's like, if you are going to ask a question, then create space for people to enter into that in kind of a non-defensive way, and put it out on the table, ingest it, and integrate it. The opposite of weaponizing is integration. How can I add this to be another data point in my wide experience of the world? How can I add this to another thing that could also be true? How can I add this to fuel the mystery rather than the rejection? And that's just what I'm calling on people to do right now. We have issues, folks. We have many things that have been trauma for folks, and many big things finally opening up, and so much falling apart. And we have a lot of people in pain, a lot of people that need tended to, but it's not going to come from weaponizing. It's going to come from integrating. And integrating is all about open heart and open minds, softness, compassion, forgiveness. And integration doesn't happen by holding on to the past. It happens by looking towards a different future and being willing to do our part to grow and evolve so that we can create that together. So remember, love wins, tend to your own evolution. And Eric, there is so much for us to understand the space between leadership and followership. I actually would love to get rid of any division, anything that divides. So I would like to take leader and followership out of it and just call for people to be evolved and continue to evolve. And in the moment that I will take a lead and perhaps get something organized and manage the administrative functions of something, I can do that. It doesn't give me more power, just gives me a function, and I can hand that back to folks. So we're talking a lot about new skills that leaders need in order to be more colleagues, less leaders, and not weaponize leadership either, and also not weaponize followership. I've seen followers weaponizing things where they demand the best from their leader while they themselves emotionally are delivering the worst. And I've heard it said, they get paid the big bucks, they should be able to, they have to take this, and they don't, and nothing good is going to come from it. I guess my whole message today is like, be nice. I have to sign off. I've got Life's Messy, Live Happy this afternoon. That's a great group. We're bringing out a bunch of new podcasts for you. We took a little break in that. Submit your questions, info@cywakeman.com. I'm glad to do and post different questions. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for doing all that you do. Keep your minds open, keep your hearts open. Be well. See you later. And Erin Hanlon, the recording will be out there. LinkedIn automatically will post the recording. So give us a little bit, and then hopefully it also subtitles it. So I have to answer one question though. Your thoughts on how the pandemic has impacted the workforce? Do you think it is more or less trauma? Have we grown up? Okay, someone on my team capture that. I'll handle that in a video next week. Thanks for the great question. I think it's Noel. I have my glasses on, so I can hardly read these. So awesome. We'll see you later.